everybody, and welcome to today's class. So, in the past few lectures, we have seen that how the problem identification is an important aspect for us to come up with a solution, and the problem that is being faced by people, other humans, stakeholders. So, today we will take a look at the stakeholder mapping and the customer journey mapping as well. We have briefly discussed these topics in previous lectures as well. So, we'll take a little bit of a deeper look into it. So, the stakeholder map is one of the initial and important steps that are required in the design process, and this gives us the information of the stakeholders feelings, behaviors, their what how are they feeling, the problems that they're facing, pain points. So it is important for any organization or any design professional to map the stakeholders and see that for their activity, for what they are designing for the stakeholders. So we'll see that how the stakeholder mapping is important for any organization. So here we can see that a few examples are here on the screen. So just for seeing that what does the stakeholder, what do they look like in any particular system. So for example, in the first example, we have a case where we have to propose education policy change. So now maybe the education system has been not been revised recently. Like we can also recall that recently the NEP guidelines have come, which we all are implementing. So similarly, time and again, these education policies need to be revised, keeping in mind the importance of today's times, what our students want, what do the industries want for placements, etc. All those things. So now in this particular case where this policy change has to be introduced, we can see that the stakeholders are parents, students, teachers. Now these are the ones who are directly involved in the curriculum. They are directly studying or teaching the curriculum, and parents are overlooking because of their concern for their ward's performance in school or college or wherever, at whatever level they are studying. Then we have the principals and school administrators. So now these are the people who are maybe not directly teaching or involved in the teaching process, but they keep an eye on the trends around them. They know that what are the opportunities in the higher education area, for example, if this is a school system we're talking about. Then board members, who are the basically decision makers, where the decision will go ultimately for the policy change. And finally, the people who will be implementing it, which is the educational policymakers at the top tier, at the government level, where they will be overlooking these policies and they will scrutinize them and take a decision whether these need to be implemented or whether they need some further change, or maybe they're not required, however the case may be. The second example here is of development of a smart home system. So now this is more from the consumer point of view, that we have to design maybe a home system for a smart home system. So here the homeowners, family members, they will be the direct stakeholders who will be using this product at home. Then we have system developers, installation technicians, and third party service providers. And in the last example here, we can see where we are developing an e-commerce website. Again, we have the customers, business owners, web developers, designers who will be designing the front end, back end of the website, then payment gateway providers and shipping companies. So we can see that the whole list of stakeholders, and now we will see that how do we map these stakeholders as per the hierarchy, or like we just talked, that their roles that they have to play in the particular given situation. So now the stakeholder mapping can be done in three ways. So the first one here we can see is the type of stakeholder mapping based on the influence. So the what influence means is that there will be primary stakeholders, there will be secondary stakeholders, tertiary stakeholders, and the quaternary stakeholders. Now, primary stakeholders are the ones who are in power. So they are employees or they can be the customers. So for example, if we are designing, we have to design software for the mobile application, then in that case the primary stakeholders will be our users, because they will be using this application hopefully throughout the day. Like for example, WhatsApp is one application that people use to be in touch with family and friends and even other acquaintances, etc. So this is the first or the primary stakeholder in this particular case. Then the secondary case holders will be in this particular case, for example, the customer support teams and the marketing teams, the suppliers, service providers, because we want the constant upgradations that are being introduced. We want the app to work smoothly. We want all the new systems or designs that have been introduced, or to keep pace with the latest, and that it doesn't crash, it doesn't stop working. And when the customer loses the trust, in case for example a website crashes, and then it stays crashed for maybe a day or two, and that will lead to people not being able to reach out to the people they want through this particular application. For example, sometimes you see that in the area of banking also, these websites crash and then we're not able to do any transactions online. So that puts a little bit of, it's like a roadblock, because we want to do something but we are unable to do it. So this group also becomes very important, because they are catering to the primary stakeholder. And then the tertiary are our government agencies, even the competitors. So there are other competitors in the market who are on a lookout of, what is the other business doing? Are they doing well? And how can I keep up my pace with them? So those also become important stakeholders, as well as any third party partners that may be there for this particular app development. So they will also be important here. And finally, our quaternary stakeholders will be maybe the local communities and the broader society. So they will be the ones that are also important, but maybe not as important as the primary stakeholder for whom we are developing this particular app for. So now we can see here, this is as per the influence that how the primary, secondary, tertiary, and the quaternary stakeholders have importance, but there is a certain hierarchy to the importance that is there when it comes to the certain problem that we have at hand. So the next stakeholder mapping is based on the interest of the stakeholders. So we have three broad groups here. So one is the high involvement. So the ones who have significant interest in the particular outcome and the project. Then we have medium involvement who have some interest, and then low involvement who have little interest in the project or the outcomes. So this is another way through which we can do the stakeholder mapping. And the third is the mapping based on relation to the project. So there we have broadly two types of stakeholders. So one is who are directly related to the project, and the ones who are not directly related to the project. So these are the external stakeholders. So now another interesting model is the salience model. And here we can see in the diagram that there are three circles which are overlapping, and we can see that one circle stands for power, the other for legitimacy, and the third for urgency. And we can see that each of these circles, there is a dormant stakeholder, a discretionary stakeholder in legitimacy, and the demanding stakeholder in urgency. So the power, the first circle that we see, the power stakeholder, is the one who has the ability to influence the project or the organization. So now these particular stakeholders can affect the decisions, they can move resources or stop the movement of resources, and they can also affect the outcome of the project, because ultimately they have power. So next is the urgency. So this is the degree to which the stakeholders' needs or claims require urgency. So urgency, or we can say immediate attention, because they are in an urgent situation. Now this urgency arises when a stakeholder has a time sensitive or critical issue. So we will see that how this plays in the entire scheme of things. And the third stakeholder group is the legitimacy. So a legitimate stakeholder has a right or ethical claim in the project's success. So these are the broad three circles we can see, and then we can also see that some portions of these circles is overlapping. So Here we can see that the dormant stakeholder, which is only in the power circle, the first one there. So now these are the stakeholders who have only power. So they do not have the legitimacy or the urgency. And these stakeholders may not be directly involved, but they could become influential in this circumstances change, because as we have seen that the ones who have power, or the power stakeholders, can really affect the outcome of the project, but the outcome of the project may not necessarily be of relevance to them personally. Now the second circle, which is the discretionary stakeholders, so their only legitimacy and they do not have power or the urgency. So now, although their involvement is important, they do not require immediate attention. So this is the second group, and the third is the demanding stakeholders, where there is only urgency and there is no legitimacy or power. So they may not be prioritized unless their situation escalates, because they are in urgency, but of course we have to balance out the legitimacy also and also the power dynamics. So these groups can wait till we do our proper research and come to the legitimate problem identification, for example. Now we can come to the next layer where these circles are overlapping with each other, and we can see that there is the fourth one, which is the dominant stakeholder, and this stakeholder is overlapping the circle of power and legitimacy. So now these are the stakeholders, of course, who have a bit of both. They have power also and they have legitimacy also, and it then becomes important to engage with them. But this group may not have any urgent needs, so they may not be the ones who are directly getting impacted by the output that we are envisioning for the particular problem at hand. The next overlapping section is the dangerous stakeholders. Now these are the ones, because they have the urgency, so they will have some immediate requirement or immediate attention they require. At the same time, they also have power, so but they lack the legitimacy. So we are still not sure about how legitimate the cause or the case is. So this can pose risk to the project if it is not managed carefully, because they have power. So they have power to move through the project, and they're urgent as well, but the legitimacy is unsure. So that can lead to failure of the project if the process is hurried and the process does not take its own process of coming out uh, from A to Z. And then we have next the dependent stakeholders, and these are overlapping with the legitimacy and the urgency, but again these people are lacking the power. So now these groups, they often rely on other stakeholders to advocate for their concerns, because they lack power. They are urgent and they have urgent concerns and they have legitimate concerns, but because the power is missing, so they are unable to take any steps or solve the problems. So they will take the help of other stakeholders, maybe stakeholders who are more powerful than them, and they will try to get the project rolling. Now we can see that in the middle of the diagram, where all the three circles are overlapping, so we have another group of stakeholders, which is the definitive stakeholders. Now these are the stakeholders where we have all three factors, which is the power, legitimacy and urgency as well. So this is the most important stakeholder, because they have all these three ingredients and their needs must be addressed on a priority. So this group is the one that really needs to be paid attention to. So by using this particular salience model, the organization or the group of designers or the team, whoever is in charge here, so they can prioritize their stakeholders based on their importance, their needs, their urgency, and other things. And they can also allocate resources and attention to the stakeholders who need it the most. So they can identify that what need must be addressed. So they can allocate resources and attention to the stakeholders that need it the most. So they can see that which particular need must be addressed first, which stakeholder needs to be addressed, who is the priority. So they can allocate the resources and start with the process. And at the same time, they can also strategically manage relationships with stakeholders to ensure the project's success, because ultimately all the stakeholders are important for the project. It is not that only one group is important. So the mapping of the stakeholders also ensures that the relationship with all these stakeholders is managed, it's balanced depending on in which particular group these stakeholders fall. Now this is the stakeholder knowledge base diagram here, and this is used for stakeholder mapping based on how much they know about a project and how is their attitude about the project. So we can see here in the x-axis we have the degree of support, and then the y-axis we have amount of knowledge. So depending on that, we will have these four groups of stakeholders, where one group is which is totally ignorant and opposing for the project. The other one is aware but opposing. The next group is aware and supporting, and the other is ignorant and supporting. So now this is another way in which the stakeholders can be mapped, so that we know that the stakeholder group, say for example ignorant and opposing, is important, but maybe they are opposing because of the ignorance. So then what measures need to be taken in order to involve them in the project? So for example, there is, it's found that some industry is dumping their waste in the river, for example, and now the water has become poisonous and it is leading to diseases. And now this, the government body or builder body is wanting to move the residents to a safer place because of the underground water contamination. And some stakeholders, the people who are living there, being the stakeholders, they either are ignorant or they are aware but ignorant, and they do not want to make a move. So then how do we also involve, we know that these stakeholders exist, and how do we ensure their safety? So what measures do we have to take in order for them to also involve in the project that we are dealing with? The next one is the power interest grid. So here on the x-axis we have the level of stakeholder interest, and on the y-axis we have power or influence of the stakeholder. And this is quite similar to the previous grid that we saw, which was based on the support and the knowledge. And here the four different stakeholder groups will be where they will keep into account, meet their needs, manage closely, and keep informed. And we have discussed this particular stakeholder mapping technique in one of the previous lectures. So you can also go back and take a look at it. We discussed it there in quite a bit of detail. So the next method is the power predictability matrix, and this is quite similar to the power grid, but instead of interest we have predictability as a factor here. So we can see in the diagram here, we again have mapped on x and y axis our power and predictability, and we can see that when it is a case of high power and low predictability, so these are the powerful stakeholders whose actions are not predictable. So they are the actions that we cannot predict that what will they do, but they of course have power, so they can take some serious actions as well. So few examples of these are like politicians or the bodies that regulate, or they are decision makers, or the key investors. And now these are the groups who may change their priorities very quickly. A politician may decide to implement some kind of, say, a waiver for the farmers one day, or however, because these guys have the power, and also we don't know their actions, how will they play out. The next is the high power and high predictability. So these stakeholders have both, so which means that they have a significant influence, but their behavior is consistent and we can anticipate that what they might do, because they are not unpredictable. So for example, we have senior executives, we have reliable project sponsors or regulatory agencies, and who have certain policies. So they maybe have some written policies, and when something is there in a document situation, in in the form of a document, so of course one can always go back and refer to them, so that one does not take any undue advantage. So, for example, in any academic institution, we have the academic calendar. So, in the academic calendar, we list down that when are the exams going to take place, when is the day to show the copies to the students, last day to enter the marks. So, it is all very predictable. The students, teachers, the entire staff, they all can be aware of the important dates, so that suddenly the dates are not sprung on them that tomorrow is the exam, or the answer sheets you will get, the last date has already passed by. So everything is very clear, and it is making it very predictable, and so that there is no sudden or surprises are there. Now the next one is the low power and low predictability. So these stakeholders, they have little influence and they are not predictable. So this also makes them a little less of the priority. So for example, we have external consultants or minor community groups who do not really have a long invested interest, but they may have erratic interest. Sometimes they may want to show interest in the cause, other times they may not turn up. So these are the groups that one cannot rely on. They are not very reliable that ways, because we cannot predict their behavior, that will they be interested or not. So these are then the ones who come in the low power, low predictability. Finally, we have the low power and high predictability group. So these are the stakeholders who may not have power, so they don't have any influence as such, but they are predictable in their actions. And these are, for example, employees in non-critical roles or passive consumers on project outcomes. So they may not have the influence, but of course they are predictable in what kind of actions will they take. So now the next method is the stakeholder relationships network, and you can see here that all these circles here on the screen, they stand for different stakeholders, and depending on the bubble size, the importance of the stakeholder is determined. So the larger the bubble, the more important the stakeholder, and we can see that these bubbles are connected through lines, these red lines, and the strength of the line, or we can say the thickness of the line, it shows the relationship between the bubbles. So if there is a big bubble, big important stakeholder, and a smaller stakeholder, but the red line is thicker, it's strong, so that means that even though these two stakeholder groups are different in terms of their influence, that one may have more power, other may have lesser power, but of course at the same time, because the line, the connection is thicker between them, so the relationship is important, so they need to be in constant touch with each other. And even if the other bubble is maybe larger but the red line is thinner, so it shows that the connection or the relationship is not as strong. Then we have the stakeholder spreadsheets, and this is most common method which is used in stakeholder mapping. And we can see here that we have the stakeholder type, we have the contact of the stakeholder, we have the topics of interest and the impact level, and this matrix is filled up. So we can see owner and the contact and the topics of interest and what is the impact, whether it is high, medium or low. So this is like a database, and so all the stakeholder information is here. We can always sort it based on what we're looking for. Are we looking for the topics of interest, or are we looking at the impact level? So if you want to identify the stakeholders who have high impact, so we will then filter this particular matrix with that particular filter of high impact, and then we will see in the hierarchy from high to medium to low. Or if you want to go by topic of interest, then the topics will align the ones we are looking for, so we can then identify the stakeholders who are important for that particular topic that we are identifying as stakeholders. So now of course this stakeholder mapping that we have just seen is, we have probably realized how important it is, because we are now trying to make sense of all the stakeholders that are going to be involved in the project. So we need to know who has power, who is legitimate, and so on, depending on which method we choose to go forward with. But that tells us that with which stakeholder we need to be more in touch with, or who is our priority, and how do we balance the stakeholders. Now, customer journey mapping is basically a tool where we are following the customer, or we are looking at the journey of the customer. And customer, as we know, is a stakeholder, and the primary stakeholder. So because we are ultimately looking at, for example, when we were discussing the examples in previous slides of, say, the education policy. So now the customer journey mapping of the student, for example, if we are doing, so how is the student navigating through this whole education that he is or she is receiving, and then what are the challenges there. So now this customer journey becomes important, because we need to understand that what are those areas which need some reforms. And of course, here we will have different customers and we will have different journeys, because if we again take the example of the education policy, so now the student is, say, the primary stakeholder, but we also have the teacher and the principal. Now principal may not be the, maybe the primary, she may be the secondary stakeholder, but her journey also is different from the student, but also important to look at that what are the challenges that she faces. Maybe she faces issues in the students performing well after they graduate, and they realize that our courses need to be upgraded, they are not as per the demand of the market. So then she will have another journey of her own. So let's take a look at this example here. So this is the journey map of a music sharing experience. So we'll take a few more examples, and we'll try to understand that what are different steps that are involved in this customer journey mapping. And then maybe you can also try out, take an example from your own life and try and map it out and see that where all do you face any challenges. So let's take example of this one here. So now in the stage 1, which is they are visiting, say maybe they open the Spotify on their phone, and then and you can see that on the left we have the stage, we have the steps, we have the thoughts, touch points, actor and emotions. So I will just go through a few of these steps, and then probably you can go through the rest of them. This is quite self-explanatory because all the thoughts and other things are displayed here. You can also go to the link which is given below, and you can access the website directly as well. So now here we can see that in stage 1 they visit the Spotify on phone. Now we can scroll down and see that the thought is that I listen to music to get me through coding certain projects. Now this is somebody, a person, a customer who likes to listen to music while they are doing some computer coding, and it maybe allows them to do this coding quickly. And also the thought is I listen to music all the time, I run to music, commute to music. Now this person listens to music all the time while running, while maybe bicycling, while doing chores at home, so they're always listening to music. And now we have our actor, which is our persona, which is fictitious character that we have built up. And now this emotion here is neutral, because they want to listen to the music while they are working. Now coming to the next stage, which is the listen. So now they browse suggestions and discover weekly playlist. So Spotify application gives them a choice of these playlists, and they choose a playlist. And then the thought is I like the discover weekly playlist. Sometimes I just don't want to keep searching for songs, and this is perfect. Next thought is I usually go to the you might also like a section. And another thought is I would have liked to have a way to see what songs were popular at the moment. So we can see that this customer is appreciating the fact that the application is providing them with the weekly playlists, and is also whatever the customer is used to listening maybe, so it is also bringing their attention to another type of music or another section which they may also enjoy. So it is going to that section, so customer likes the section. And we can see here emotion, which is excited to see all the suggested playlist. And we can see that when we are plotting the emotions, so we have the neutral, say, at the horizon. So when we go to a beach maybe, we see that we can far away you can see horizon, which is where the earth and the ground meets. and so there's water underneath and the sky is above. So here the neutral is the horizon, and whether the emotion is getting positive, so then we will map it above, and if it goes negative, we'll map it down below. So here excited we have mapped above, but we can also see that in the next mood, which is due to the discover phase. So something may have happened which is not making them feel very good about it. So now they are annoyed, and we can see that the graph goes down. So they are annoyed because they see the music suggestions that don't fit their tastes at all. So the app is not able to predict what they prefer, and the music that is being offered to them, they're not liking it. But the next one we see stoked. So it is even more excited than the excited smiley. It's even a level above that, because they are happy to find a new artist. So we can see here that how this graph of emotion is going up and down or remaining neutral depending on how the journey of the customer progresses in terms of thinking to listen to music and finally to the end of their journey. And we can see at different stages we are mapping the emotions, so that it also tells us visually that what is working and what is not working for the customer. So we have discussed also that how this customer journey mapping tells us about the journey of the customer while they're interacting with a product or a service. At the same time, it is also telling us about the emotions or the feelings that they are going through at that particular time. And so this makes it very important step in this process. Now another example is here of somebody who is booking a tour for travel. So now maybe you can recall your own trip that probably you made recently, that how the whole trip started, and then were there any points in the trip that made you feel certain emotions. So now maybe looking at the sunrise, reaching early, although one had to maybe wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to catch the sunrise point, but looking at the sunrise, one may have felt really excited, really happy. And maybe some other point wherein probably there was some problem with the hotel room, maybe the fan did not work or the light did not work or TV did not work, and half an hour was spent in getting it fixed. So maybe that would have made one feel a little, sad about that particular incident. So we can also, maybe you can also try looking at any of your journey that you have experienced, and then see that how are you associating those emotions with those certain steps that you are facing in that journey. And here also we can see that the customer experience, which starts by exploring the itinerary and then booking a tour, then pre-tour, during tour and post-tour. So this is the whole journey. So it's not just one being on the tour, but also that anticipation that we have discussed in previous lectures also, that how it is so important, that the anticipation, the build up of the excitement, and then the whole climax of the excitement, the experience, and then the culmination of it. So the whole experience then comes together. Now this could also be like a very small or incident like going for a movie. So friends planning a movie on the weekend, and then if they plan on say a Wednesday, now they are thinking about it on Thursday, on Friday as well. Maybe they're trying not to see any of these movie advertisements which might give away the story, and the anticipation is building up. We will have popcorn, we will have Pepsi, and that whole, the journey from booking the tickets to reaching the theater in time to catch the advertisements, order the beverages, and then watching the movie with friends. So the entire, and then coming out of it, finding the car in the parking where we had parked it very easily. So the whole journey where the issue was encountered, maybe while booking the tickets, it did not accept the card. It may say this card, we do not accept this card, or maybe the seat that they wanted to book was already taken, or in the meantime they were trying to figure out for another payment, somebody else got their seat. So that may sort of leave some bad taste in the mouth, but then they will uplift the mood by trying to get another seat which is probably equally good as the one they wanted. So just giving examples of how at all these different stages the emotions are also equally involved. So one will feel excited or sad or disappointed or happy. So this example also you can go through, and the link is also given at the bottom of the slide, and we can see here that we are mapping this based on the touch points. So I will just cover the first section, which is explore the itinerary. So here the touch point is the tour details, because now to explore how do we plan, say it is a 1 week trip, they are planning to Bali for example. So how do we go about planning this trip? So the whole schedule of the trip, because we don't want to waste a single day, a single hour, we want to utilize all the time. So now we will have to get some tour details. We'll probably look at experiences of people who have been there earlier, see that recommendations that they are giving us, maybe pre-sale support channel, tour booking pages, and then will come the thinking and feeling, which is lack of sophisticated tour searching, brochure is not printable, lack of real-time support channel, no way to compare tours. So now they have gone on a website and they're trying to compare, but there is no way they can compare the tours, or they are not able to print out the brochure, so they are encountering some problems. And then we also have the recommendations, which are support advanced searching, support printer friendly brochure, support more sharing options for tour details. So now for each of these steps in the journey, so we will have the touch points, we will have the thinking and the feeling of the customer, where are they feeling frustrated, and whatever point is we find are frustrating for the customer, then the recommendations can be formulated that how do we take care of these frustrations so that the user does not feel them in the future. Now there are a few stages when it comes to the customer journey. So we can see first is the awareness, then consideration, decision, retention, and advocacy. And for any organization who is offering a solution, or their work deals around designing experience for the user, then these all steps need to be really integrated in their system. So the first is the awareness, and this is the first point of contact with the product, and this prospect has a specific need or a problem, so this particular group or the customer that we have, but they still cannot define exactly what is it. So in response to understand that what exactly it is, they will do some kind of a broad research, because they still do not know. So maybe it can be like a user has a few holidays at hand, but they don't know what to do with those holidays. So they are just going to just do a broad research that what can be done in those 5 days. Okay, so now at this stage, because it is only a stage where the broad research is happening, so it is too early to expect that they will make a decision and purchase maybe some service. It's too early for that. So at this stage, they're only looking for broad information, just some direction, so they can make up my mind to go in a particular direction to further research into. The next is our consideration. So now at this stage, the need or problem has been clearly defined. So now the customer knows, for example, if it is a trip they have to make. So now they clearly know that 5 days I'm going to leave the city. I will not be spending my 5 days here at home watching, YouTube shorts or wasting my time, but I will go and maybe backpack trip or something. I will just go out for 5 days. So they have made a decision. So now they will extend this research that they were doing in some other maybe some definite angles, and they will now approach to solve the problem or the need that they've identified for themselves. So for this, they will have some options that they will shortlist for themselves, and then they will try to further see that which one works for them. Now the next is our decision stage. So the customer has chosen a strategy, so they have now made a decision, and so now they will probably make a list of providers. So they are booking a ticket, for example, a flight ticket, so they will compare maybe the flight ticket on different websites or the hotels they have to book. So they will see as per their need, the beach hotel, is it available, distance from the airport and other things. So now this decision making step they have come to. So now they are coming close to closing this deal that they have been researching about. And at this stage, it's important for the business to really stand out and make their pitch in a way. So, for example, if the customer is looking at two different hotels, they are not sure which one to go for. In that case, say the customer feedback, the people who have already stayed in the hotel. So that comes really handy, wherein the customer feedback that they have left may say that it is a very good hotel, good location, good food. It's ideal for families, also for people who want to come on a backpacking trip. So some of those kind of statements will really give the confidence to our user that since other people have also had a good time here, so I might also likely have a positive experience. So this then becomes very critical. At this stage, the businesses need to really back up with their claims like customer feedback and other strategies which are similar to this. Then comes our next stage, which is retention. So here we need to retain our customer. So we have worked really hard up to this point to really keep our customer engaged and to give them sort of a look into what to expect. Maybe before they made a decision, we gave them a 3D tour of our property if we are a hotel owner, and that made the customer really put a seal on the deal. But now we have to retain the customer also. Again, it may depend from service and the business product also, that how do we keep that customer coming back to us again and again. And finally, we have the advocacy, which is probably one of the most important stages, where we are trying to turn our customer into an advocate or an ambassador for our cause. And there are several ways in which this is done by the customers. So one of the strongest ways is the word of mouth. So when this person comes back refreshed from his trip and the colleagues ask about how they are glowing and they look so happy and relaxed, and then the our customer tells him about the hotel where they stayed and how the service was top notch, the location was perfect, and all the sightseeing spots were within reach. So how it really made their stay very pleasant. So now this word of mouth sort of advertisement that they have given to their colleagues. So next time they consider going to this particular location for a family trip, they will surely look into the recommendation that they have received from their friend. So that is why the advocacy also becomes very important. And how do we ensure that our customer goes back and does that? So of course, one who really wants others to also have the same experience will may automatically tell them about the resort or hotel that they should definitely check out if they are in the area. But other ways are also wherein we are attentive to the needs of our customer and we are taking their follow up, they're taking their feedback. Even after the trip has come to an end, we ask for their feedback and ways in which we can improve our services. So the customer will think that, of course, the service was really so good, but the business owner still wants to make it even better. And that will, of course, really win the heart of the customer here and will make them a loyal customer as well. So we can now see that how these 5 stages are also important for the business point of view. So these are the components of the customer journey. So the persona, because the fictitious character, we have discussed in the previous lecture as well, that how we are trying to come up with this character which embodies the traits of a certain demography. And then the purchase journey phases, the touch points, the customer thoughts and actions, and the pain points and the emotional journey that they are going through throughout this whole process. So with this, we come to the end of today's lecture and I will see you all in the next class. Thank you.